Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Vinyl Safari podcast. My name is Sean Patterson. The ethos behind Vinyl Safari is to talk all things music with fascinating people in and around the industry. This podcast was something of a pipe dream for quite a while, and upon a chance direct message on Twitter, it quickly became a reality, as luck would have one of my personal heroes, Hawksley Workman, agreeing to be our first guest. I went out that same day to buy the microphones necessary to record the podcast, sent a few emails, and within a week I was chatting face-to-face, so to speak, with Hawksley. I hope you all enjoy this little passion project and find it as engaging and insightful as I did. We hope to release episodes relatively regularly, and if there's anyone in particular that you think would be a fitting guest, or better yet, if you have a way to connect us with such a person, please do get in touch. Hawksley Workman is a Canadian rock singer-songwriter with an expansive and eclectic career. Even to describe him as simply a rock singer-songwriter is to do him little justice, as his catalog of albums and projects is as stylistically diverse and unpredictable as they come. Hawksley is a multiple JUNO Award nominee and winner, and has produced music for such artists as Great Big Sea, Hey Rosetta, Serena Ryder, John Southworth, and Tegan and Sarah, to name only a few. In 2014, Hawksley released the first of two rock records with his Canadian rock supergroup Mounties, and as of only a couple weeks prior to the recording of this conversation, he released his most recent studio album, Less Rage, More Tears, which is unofficially his 16th full-length release since 1998. We discuss life as a musician in 2020, his interactive live stream project Hawksley Night in Canada, the evolution of the music industry throughout his career, what makes great music timeless and universal, and many other topics. I hope you enjoy this new venture, and if you do, please share it around, subscribe to Oakridge Ave on YouTube, and across our other social media platforms so you can stay up to date with future episodes and all our other music and video content. Without further ado, I bring you Mr. Hawksley Workman. All right, so Hawksley Workman, thank you for coming on the Vinyl Safari podcast.
Oh man, thanks for having me.
So how have you been these days?
Like these days, COVID-wise, you mean?
It's the dreaded COVID question, I suppose.
I've been trying in a way to not. I've been pretty good. I've been better than good. I've been great. And as a CBC fanatic, I know that I hear a lot of news stories about people that haven't been doing so well. So I feel like I've been doing quite well, and I really put a focus on health. And we had moved from Montreal to Peterborough at the very beginning, so we were looking for a house. And I don't know. I've just been been very busy as well, and just been lucky, feeling really blessed, really lucky to have kept work going through all of this. So yeah, I'm doing pretty well, but thanks for asking.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. I have to say, from all the musicians that I follow, I think you've probably had the best, most creative, and most engaging approach to live streams that I've seen in your Hawksley Night in Canada streams. So what was the sort of impetus behind that that got that going?
Well, first, thanks for saying, for highlighting that. It was a dream in a way. I've always harbored this idea of doing. To be honest with you, Hawksley Night in Canada started out as an idea about 10 or 12 years ago, and I pitched it to the CBC, almost like a variety show. Variety shows have a history in Canada of not doing very well, or at least in the last couple of decades. Of course, variety shows used to do very well with like Tommy Hunter, and it goes back to another time. But when I was a kid, I had a talk show on the local cable network in Huntsville. Mm-hmm. I went into McLean Hunter because a friend of mine had a show too, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you just got to go in and fill out a form, and they give you a show." So I was like, "Oh man, that sounds great." So I went into the TV station. I said, "A buddy has a show here," and he said all I needed to do was fill out a sheet, and then I get a show. And he's like, "Well, it's not that easy, but it's almost that easy." So I filled out the sheet, had my show. Fast forward all these years, honestly, I still harbor a great love of small town media, or not even small town media, just now that everything has been monopolized and the internet makes everything global, no matter how you slice it, like there's lots of great things about that. There's lots of beautiful, nuanced parts of small community-oriented thinking that disappears. And so I think with Hawksley in Canada, I was scared that my job was disappearing, and I'm still a little bit worried that my job is going to change beyond past what I currently recognize it as. But I was like, well, if this is going to go on a long time, I'm going to have to come up with something interesting. I had seen some friends do those web broadcast shows, and I thought, man, I don't want the gap between what I do live on stage and what I would put out on the online platform to be like that. To be like, man, he's great live. Wow, when I saw him on that live stream, it wasn't very good. I kind of wanted it to be great, and so we put the time in. We bought a lot of equipment. Like I just said right out of the gate, because my wife Jennifer, who manages the business and is kind of like a creative partner on these things. She runs all of in Canada behind the scenes. I was like, I think there's only one way we can do this. Like, I think we need 3 cameras, we need a switcher, we need full lighting. We need to really go after this if we're going to make it something that we can feel proud of. So that's how that worked.
Yeah. Well, it really turned out fantastic. I love the pet songs and the call in and everything. It just really made for an interactive and sort of wholesome experience.
It is wholesome. Like,
yeah,
I feel like when I was younger, I was kind of rowdy, and a lot of the songs and stuff were about this like libidinous, rowdy, boozy character. And as I've gotten older, like my fans are my age. Like I know you're younger. You're in your early 30s,
mid 20s at the moment.
Oh my God, you're so young. I don't know how'd you find me, I guess. Like, I mean,
well, actually, I have to credit my parents for that. My stepmom is a massive, massive Hawksley fan. And I just grew up listening to, I think it was sort of in between, I think it was around Delicious Wolves and then on into Tree Full of Starling. I really started to take notice, and I was like, wow, these are really, really cool songs. And then I picked up a guitar myself.
Yeah,
started writing and just absolutely fell in love with your styles of writing and the breadth of styles that you cover in your work. So I was like, if this guy can just make a record of any genre that he wants, I'm going to try and do that. Like that's just a fantastic motivator for me personally.
Oh, that's cool. Well, your stepmom sounds amazing.
She is.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, that's really heavy. Okay, so. Yeah, I don't know why was I talking about generations? Oh yeah, wholesome family entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's hit me that a lot of people who are fans of what I do, they discovered me while they were in college or university back in the late 90s. And so, fast forward all these years, these people want to introduce me to their kids and like have it like all of a sudden I feel like I've become like music that the family can agree on, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And that's probably in some ways just because I always said like the Beatles were the best kids music ever. Like,
Right.
You can buy children's music, like I'm going to go and listen to children's musical artists, or you can just listen to music that the color intensity, like the saturation is just turned up a little bit, and it's just, all it is like, like I was obsessed with the Beatles as a little kid. And I think a lot of kids are if they get exposed to the Beatles. And why is that? It's because the color saturation is just turned up in Beatles music. Like when you were a kid listening to Beatles, it's like, it just feels brighter, sunnier, wilder, more extreme, kind of more elemental. The colors are somehow more dense in the colored spaces. And it's like, I feel like, not that I'm comparing myself to the Beatles, because I'm not, you can't do that. But I'm just saying that I think why kids or why families kind of gravitate to what I do is that, the other thing is I'm never trying to be cool, or what I think is cool is literally not cool. Because I'm not I'm not cool, like real cool people who exist in the world, like who know the cool thing to do or say. Like I just, like just before I hit the Zoom meeting with you, I was listening to Alan Holdsworth, cranked because my wife's out of town. And it's like, I don't really know who's listening to Alan Holdsworth these days. Like,
right.
I'm checking it out because I want to hear Chad Wackerman play. And it's like, Ah, I went through high school being that guy in a way while people were like getting into cool music. I was
Right.
listening to John Scofield, you know, and that is how I still operate. I think that the music I love and the way I make music, I still comes from that childlike place where music is still about wonder and amazement to me.
Hmm.
And I still want it to be like wild and exciting and surprising. And the thing is that being wild and exciting and surprising is no way to try and get into the music business these days, because streaming is king. Streaming is about make your record sounding like background music. That's how have an effective streaming career,
Hmm.
is that your music sounds, it doesn't really jump out. So it's like it fits on a dinner party playlist. You get on several dinner party playlists. All of a sudden it's like, look, I get a lot of spins. I find my music, even back in the day when it was being pitched to commercials and stuff, like you'd always hear back, like, it's just too much. Like the client, they heard the song and they're like, it's just the guy, it takes over the product. We just need a song that like
Yeah.
sits in the background. And I've just never been very good at background music, but what are you
Yeah.
going to do?
I like that you use the word colorful, though. That really is exactly how I see your music, and much of the music that I gravitate towards as well.
Yeah.
I use the term ear candy a lot too. If ever I'm listening to a song, even songs that I consider to be good, or artists that I generally like or that are doing very well, if it's just lacking in something to catch your attention and maybe throw you off guard now and again, I just find it difficult to go back and really enjoy regularly. Whereas
Yeah.
songs that just, they have things that come out of left field and sort of demand your attention in a way that, like you say, streaming and background and really, really, common pop music these days doesn't quite do.
Yeah. Well, I remember when you sent me a single from your record and I was in France. It must have been like spring of last year.
Right.
And I remember spinning it a few times and thinking like it was very exciting, and it had a few twists and turns. It had a couple of like unexpected moments. And beyond the fact that like rock music is just 100% not fashionable, like it was also seemed like, man, I don't know what you even do with a rock song that is this interesting, you know, like, again, because as a producer and as somebody who's like a creature of the business, I can't help it whenever somebody sends me something, especially a young person's band, like, it's like, how does this fit into what's happening? And I mean, there's no guitars on the radio anymore, really. Like,
Yeah.
not guitars like when I was a kid, like there was guitar music on the radio. There's not guitar centric music at all on the radio unless you're listening to Q107 or some of the indie stations. But even indie rock now, indie rock is almost like guitar is implied but not explicit. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Not so much a feature anymore.
That's right. It's like there's a guitar in the video, but if you listen to the track close, you don't really know if there's an actual guitar in there. And that's kind of how indie music kind of operates too. And it's like, which is fine. There's like fashions come and go, but what you sent me a year and a half ago was like, man, this is pretty good rock music. Like,
Thank you.
guitars, people are playing this. Like, there's a real drummer, all the kinds of stuff you don't really hear much. Like, I mean, I guess I wonder for somebody who's in their 20s, like, I don't know if you even want to discuss it, but I'm just curious where you're at with your thing. Like, how does the music landscape look for you these days?
Gosh, I don't even really know, to be honest. Similarly, the rug was kind of pulled out from under us early on this year, so we kind of had to shelve a lot of our expectations and sort of take it as it goes. We did end up deciding to put the record out on the same day we originally planned. It was a little bit of a lame sort of live stream, listen and explain and chat about the process and everything, which was certainly not what we'd hoped.
Right.
But it was nice to get it out there at least. Like, we'd been sitting on it for about a year at the time we put it out. People were excited to hear it, and it was kind of a weight off our shoulders, even though we weren't able to capitalize in the same way.
Right.
But I think generally for us as rock musicians, I mean, we're constantly thinking like, this stuff is, we know that we're writing music and performing music that just isn't, in the for lack of a better phrase, the mainstream, and this isn't going to be everybody's like top track on, and that they're going to hear on the radio and all that. Though I am conspiring in the back of my mind, I would really love to try and get a guitar solo onto a top 40 radio station. That's just a little pipe dream of mine. But it really comes down to the attitude, I think. Like you say, there's something just visceral for me about hearing real instruments and real people, and the slight imperfections and push and pull that you get from that. And even if it's music that I wouldn't really consider myself a fan of or listen to regularly, if it has that one factor, it immediately sort of gets points in my head, and I there's an appreciation there at the very least.
Yeah, I feel you, and it's funny, like hearing like, you know, you have a goal to put a guitar solo on the radio, and I get that. Like, it's because like fundamentally, I'm a player first. Like everything for me always goes back to the fact that I trained myself as a kid, and I know looking back, it was abnormal how like focused and obsessive I was. But my whole goal was to be a session drummer for hire. Like that was my goal for 15 years before I'd considered writing songs. So I still have like musician goals as well. And like when the Mounties song Headphones got on the radio, I was like, similarly, I was like, fuck, I don't think that drum beat from that song I think that's a new beat on the radio.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely
sure that I don't think that beat has ever been on the radio. And for a drummer kid who was like, to think that I've put a drum beat on the radio that possibly never existed on the radio before is pretty exciting. Like, and I could only like share that with musos. Like, I don't think that just anybody would think, well, who cares? But for me, like in terms of like my musician's hardcore muso like bucket list, new beat on the radio, like how incredible is that? Like it's like putting how impossible to put a new beat on rock radio. Sometimes I even think like I obsess over this about like the origins of pop rock drumming. And you know, I obsess about a lot of stuff, but I obsess too about how the indie community likes to shit on U2. Now, U2 hasn't made music that I like for a very long time, but it's unfair to like count them out completely, because I often think of the origin of indie drumming and what became cool indie drumming, and it has to go back to U2's War. It has to go back to the Sunday Bloody Sunday beat.
Yeah,
like exactly. When like the idea that not every beat had to be done, and all of a sudden, like I remember even as a kid, like I got that record from a friend who was like my de facto older brother. I got it on vinyl for my like, I don't know, 14th birthday in like 1985, like 1989, and it was just like, sorry, what? Like who is doing this? Yeah. Are you even allowed to do this? And like you start to like come across these moments where a musician, for whatever reason, just decides to like take several decades of momentum. Like all you need to do is boom, cats, boom, boom, cat, and go, I'm not doing that. I'm doing shaka chaka cats, and then it starts to like a light goes on a whole part of the house of your own like musical like understanding that you didn't even know was there. Like, and I feel like I go back a lot of the musicians that and artists that had the biggest influence on me did that. They didn't just like do something conventional. They did something that made me as a young person go, you're allowed to do this? Like, and maybe it's because I was raised in a working class family, and wasn't like it wasn't like, I guess I was raised in a way that feels to me somewhat predictable. And I think that I don't know if I was set on my own course just due to my own upbringing, what have you, to be cluing into absurdities in music and stuff like that. Like, I think that like for me, like stumbling across Spooky Rubin was a big one, the Rheostatics and Jane Siberry, a lot of Canadian artists who just like took melody and took production and took like even abstract lyrical content and when I was just young, you'd stumble across. Spooky Reuben was a big one because it happened when I was like 18 or 19 that I got the. Do you know Spooky Reuben at all?
Rings a bell. I'm not familiar though.
I highly recommend you checking out Spooky's big first record called Modes of Transportation, which is so bizarre and so shockingly creative. And it came at a time when I was like 18, I'd quit high school. I was living in Montreal. I was starting to like this idea that I would be an artist was starting to become something I was pursuing seriously. And then this kid, Spooky Reuben, comes along. He had a kind of a big record deal with TVT, like a really cool record company out in New York. And this guy just didn't play by any of the rules. There's like some XTC in his thing.
Right.
Anyway, I remember as a kid just hearing that and thinking, like, the rules do not exist. Like, I was under the impression, and again, because I was a really fastidious practicer as a kid, and like, I came up in the Dave Weckl School of Drumming. Like, I did the thousands of hours. Like, I did the maniacal amount of attention paid to playing rudiments and stuff like that. And then, like, when you get into like rigid mind frames, which is really easy to do in music, like you get into your conventional way of doing stuff, and especially if you're somebody who's dedicated to idiom, which I'm loosely dedicated to idiom because as a drummer, I was like, well, you learn idiom. It's like you learn a bossa nova, you learn to play like convincing waltzes. You learn, anyways. I'm Sean. I've like hijacked your conversation.
No, this is great. By all means, I love it.
Go check out Spooky Reuben, Modes of Transportation, man. I'm telling you. So for Spooky's second record, I started to hang out with him in Toronto when I first moved there, and his second, like, I don't think his first record didn't do the numbers anybody had hoped. So there was like pressure on him for his second record, and I don't think there was the same amount of like momentum behind his career. But you know, Chili Gonzalez, who produced Leslie Feist records, he lives in Germany now, but he was in Paris at the time. Anyways, going back to when he was a solo artist on Warner Records, his name was Jason Beck, and so like Jason Beck and I were hired by Spooky Reuben to be his rhythm section when he was recording his demos, and like. Still had to have been like 98, 99. So I got to be in the studio with Spooky when he was like still like finishing the songwriting part of his thing. And I was just a drummer. I was a kid. I was probably like 19 or 20. And Jason Beck, who would soon become like the Grammy winning producer of all those big Feist albums, like it's just the three of us in the room. And like, it was pretty interesting company, but I would like watch Spooky put songs together. And like, you know, he'd be like, okay, so he'd play the tune. He'd be like, okay, I get it. And then we'd all jam it and we'd get it pretty tight. We'd record a version of that song. And again, my mind's blown because I'm in a room with one of my heroes. And then he'd say like, okay, good. We got a version of that. Now let's take this song and let's make the chorus the bridge. And we're going to do the bridge as the chorus. So we just like switch it right out, like 100% completely. And it's like, again, like I'm 19 going, hold it. Like, this is allowed. You're allowed to take something that you compose as a bridge and just like totally be completely like irreverent of the structure, like irreverent of the context. And then all of a sudden I'm like swapping it out as a drummer. Like I'm, drum fill into the new chorus, which used to be the bridge. And I'm like, and it works. It works because this guy is impossibly hooky. The bridge was hooky, even though we only got to hear it once. When you reframe it 3 times in the context of a pop song, it's like, fuck, this thing was just as hooky as the chorus. How did this kid fucking do this? Like, how? And I'm like, like it's too much, it's too much for me. But I was really lucky as a drummer in Toronto in the late 90s to play with some very serious songwriters who I got to watch them do their thing up close without any without it being attached to me in any capacity. You know what I mean? Like I could watch the mistakes get made without it being attached to my name or my reputation or anything. And it was like kind of amazing, like, like John Southworth was another one. I don't know if you know John Southworth at all, but like a Spooky Reuben, John's first record, Mars, Pennsylvania, was another record that in my early life in Toronto just blew the doors wide open. Like I was like, who is this guy? Like where does he get off being this interesting and this creative? Like I didn't know that was even allowed. And then I later ended up in his live band and I produced his second record and got to work up close with those people. I was really lucky in those days. But again, and it all goes back to, if I'm to reframe it or to return to where this conversational motif started, is that like the people that fascinated me, my heroes, the goals I set for myself, putting a solo on the radio in the 21st century, guitar solo on the radio in the 21st century, like this kind of stuff, it's all very muso-centric. And like, I mean, I still spin Zappa once a week. Like, like I still go back to that well of like musicians. It's where my heart of hearts, that's where like my musical love is inhabited,
Yeah. It's like the whole grains of music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's the spelt of music for sure.
Yeah. I did want to ask you a little bit about the new record, Less Rage, More Tears. First of all, I love it. It's absolutely fantastic. I think I listened to it 3-4 times in a row the first day while I was at work. I think that might have been the day that we connected on Twitter as well. I can't remember, but I remember just thinking, oh my God, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. And this is a great record, and what an amazing time for this to happen. So first of all, I just was curious about sort of the general ethos and approach for this record.
Yeah. Well, it was written and recorded as Median Age Wasteland was literally being mixed. Murray Lightburn, who produced and mixed Median Age and did a phenomenal job of it, and also wrote all the string arrangements, which I think give some of those tunes their somewhat timeless feel. He was mixing that record, and I knew that I still had a lot of lyrics left from the original process of writing that record, and there had been a lot of new lyrics come in the interim. And so I had met Marcus Paquin, who I co-wrote the new record with, and who mixed and produced the new record. I met him the first day I was in Montreal. He was working with Tim Baker from Hey Rosetta, literally a block away from the apartment I bought in Mile End. And, they invited me up to the studio the day I moved in. And I was like, of course. And I met this guy, and I was like, man, he's a beautiful guy. Like, so we had said like day one, oh, we'll definitely work together. So, I tend to like to be busy all the time. Like I tend to be nervous when things get quiet. So I put pretty much anything that I had to do for Median Age Wasteland got done. I wasn't required anymore, but I still had a lot of like feeling of urgency. So I reached out to Marcus and just said like, what do you think? Like, can we do something? He's like, yeah, come on over. And so we just started to spit out these songs, and it happened really quickly. All of these songs were written mostly from drum beats and like synth riffs. I went into the studio every morning with no idea of what we were going to do. Like I hate going into writing sessions like, oh, I'll bring an idea. It's like, no, don't bring an idea. Because anytime for me, when you bring an idea, you're married to it. And then if that idea isn't working, you tend to want to stick with it longer. Cause like, well, this was the idea I brought, so we got to like see it through. And it's like, no, fuck that. Like I like coming into the studio with no idea, having no attachment to any idea. So if like the idea is not working, you toss it quick, I think of the song like Dwindling Beauty off of this record. And like that song had like 3 choruses before we landed. Oh, no. Young and Wasted had 3 choruses, and it had like, and they were impossibly bad. And it was like, if I had come in with like, here's my idea, like you fight for it. No, we got to use this. This is my idea. Anyway, so all of those songs were written, lyrics and music were written in the studio, and mostly were 85% finished by the end of the day. I was also like in a state of like testing out sobriety as well at that point, in
Mm-hmm.
which I've been sober for like 14 months now, which,
Oh, wow.
not that I was like a raging drinker or anything, but drinking had become habitual through the years of being like young rock star who people want to see. They want to live out that fantasy, at least back in the day. Like it was a part of like, oh, he's young and beautiful and destroying himself. Like that's part of like the archetypal narrative of like, he's 25, beautiful, drinks a bottle of wine a day, and he like gets on stage and does this thing. And you wake up one day and you sort of reevaluate your life, as I did last year, and kind of was like, or over the last couple of years, where I was like, for whatever reason, I was quite happy to destroy myself. And there's even lyrics on this record like about like slow suicide by wine, which,
first of all, my favorite song title of 2020. Absolutely. Sorry.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, but I mean, that song is like is recent evidence of the fact that I still harbor an extreme, I don't know, I still harbor a suicidal sensibility. And I always have. Like, it really came into focus after Lover Fighter was sort of deemed a failure. And I started to consider like not living all the time. Like for 4 years, I was like, I should maybe just not live if like, I thought my career was going to fall apart. And this was back in my late 20s. And, I'm uneducated too. I don't have a high school diploma. I didn't go to university. Like all of a sudden, like the catastrophic sense of like your career falling apart, like when you plug into a major label system and then you can feel it didn't work and it's starting to like unravel. And anyways, I know that drinking was like a companion to even the fuck you, you're drunk and acting tough. Like those, like that self-destructive, self-loathing energy that has been a sort of a part of my music and my life and my career. Like you come to a point where like the slow suicide by wine, like that's just, I can't invest in the world. Like I can't invest in the news. I can't invest in the president or the prime minister. I can't invest in this stuff. Like I gave my life over to like the negativity that is in the planet and is in humanity. And like I gave myself to that for so many years that I lately I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try to be a good husband and a good artist and try not to invest in the complexities and the insanity of the world and of humans. And like, and I stopped drinking, and all of a sudden I stopped feeling like less like I got to move to Italy with my wife and drink myself to death, like on a beach on the Ligurian Sea. Like, it's like all of a sudden I'm like a much happier customer day to day. Like I'm not feeling so like just so brutally sinister about things, and and that's part of even the early question about COVID. Like I've been pretty good. Like I know a lot of people who sobered up through COVID, and I know a lot of people who started to drink a lot more in COVID as well. And my narrative was a lot about being middle-aged and healthy through COVID, which is kind of not rock and roll. It's pretty like, oh, really? Like, oh, cool guy is like healthy through COVID, like womp womp, but like, it's pretty good. Like I still feel competitive. Like that's the other thing, is this idea of wanting to put a guitar solo on the radio in 21st century. Like it's that to me smells of a competitive instinct that I still feel. Like I'm still like, I still want to win. I still want to put something phenomenally interesting into the world. Like I still want people to go, holy shit. Like I want to be Spooky Reuben to somebody else. You know what I mean? Like I want that whoever to listen to think that, oh, there's potentially like more possibilities to music than, because if you're listening to modern radio, there's a lot of very interesting production on modern radio. Of course, like you can't deny that. But interesting songwriting, I'm not so sure anymore. And I
Right.
know, like, of course, that just sounds like a grumpy old man who's out of touch with songwriting or out of touch with reality. But it's like, as a kid who obsessed over 80s music and who still obsesses over 80s music, I think of like being able to turn on the radio in the 80s and hear songwriting like Aha's Take on Me, or Come On Eileen, or She Blinded Me with Science, or like you name it. Like,
Yeah.
songwriting that was so bizarrely, wildly, frighteningly interesting, that was also making people rich. And that was all happening in the 1980s. Like, it's like the human imagination had like Prince, Michael Jackson. I've been talking a lot about lately why I am so nostalgic for the 1980s. And it was that the zeitgeist put forward virtuosos and geniuses to be my heroes. So in the mid 1980s, I was obsessing over Michael Jackson, Prince, Eddie Van Halen, Paul Simon. Like, the music business, like arguably some of the greatest that ever were and ever would be, were on the radio and were being offered to me. Like in 1985, let's say I was 10 years old, and the zeitgeist was saying, "Here you go, kid. This is the shit we're selling you," you know? And it's like, oh, okay. You know, without question, I'm like, yeah, Purple Rain, okay, Thriller, cool. Like 1980, the 1983 record from, Van Halen or Paul Simon, Graceland. It's like, how in the world did we go from giving kids this music and kids these artists to be their heroes to fast forward only like a generation, and there's like this extraordinary emptiness? And like, even like, let's say I was a Duran Duran fan, and like Seven and the Ragged Tiger is like a brilliant record. Duran Duran were considered a boy band in the 1980s. Yeah, they were all art school kids. They were all musicians playing their own instruments, and they were making ridiculously creative albums and pop music back then. And so fast forward, I just think the zeitgeist operates very differently within pop culture. And if I'm looking to who's on the radio now that could be considered a virtuoso or a genius, well, quite frankly, I don't know, and I don't want to sound overly grumpy because I don't listen to much of the radio. I mean, I know Jay-Z is an unmitigated genius. Like, I know, but he's an artist that I hold very close to my heart. I don't know. I'm sure there are great things out there, but I think the music business at large is not giving kids like the kind of heroes that the music business gave me going back to when I was a kid.
Hold on a minute. Are you telling me that the second coming of musical genius isn't Cardi B?
I don't know Cardi B. I don't, and I don't want to be that guy who speaks ill of music that I don't really, really know.
I do.
But I will say
I try to do the same.
But I will say that my ear, like, I still love modern music. I still love the music industry. I still love stuff that is hard to love about music. And I still try and listen to hit radio. I still want to know what that sounds like. There are moments of Cardi B in the music that I've heard, which is not very much, where I go, I get it. And I like it. I fundamentally like rap music. Not only like it, I love it. Like, to me, I feel like being alive at a time when Jay-Z is making current records, current music, I feel like I get to have that same feeling of what it must have felt like to have been alive listening to the Beatles and Bob Dylan making records when they were current. Like, where you go like, I can't believe I'm alive at a time of the greatest that ever was and ever will be is making music right now. And we're like the same age, and we're like sharing the same like cultural sentiments. I feel that with Jay-Z. Like, I still hear him and go, like, I'm listening to the greatest that ever was and ever will be at a time when it like I am alive. Like, it's not like I'm going and like retrospectively going like, man, Zappa, how do you top Zappa? It's like, I feel that even a little bit about some of the later Leonard Cohen albums. Like, I like all of Leonard Cohen's early stuff, but when he made The Future, I was in high school and I bought that album in the 90s, and I was like, Vinnie Colaiuta was the drummer on that album. And it's like it's neat when you can have a true to life genius operating while you're alive, you know? So I feel that same way about Jerry Seinfeld. I feel that same way about Ricky Gervais as well. Like, I feel that's really, I can really feel that with comedy. Dave Chappelle is another. Like, I just feel like, wow, like how lucky am I that I get to be alive? Like, I'm always scanning the marketplace for the great. Like, what's great? Don't give me, I'm not interested in what sells. I'm interested in what's attached to a fundamental greatness, because I need to plug into that as an energy source. Like, I want to know what's extraordinary.
Do you think maybe there's something about the current era and the availability that maybe keeps us from necessarily recognizing who the current geniuses are in the same way that people may have back with the Beatles and the Stones and everything? Because when I think about it, like, there are people operating now who I consider to be geniuses, who are absolutely my favorites, and it's amazing to be able to, like you say, go and buy their new record and see them live still, and it's all very current. But given that we have the ability to listen to everything that's ever been recorded in the history of the species, I wonder if that breadth just makes it more difficult to pin down when something really revolutionary is happening, because people it doesn't get the same kind of attention that it might otherwise, and the tide just shifts so quickly these days.
Yeah. Well, when you look at business or industry of any kind, research and development is like the impossibly difficult column in your like your financial plan. Like, it'd be like, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have to spend so much money on figuring out how to make this product better or safer or whatever, cheap, you know? R&D in any, like, is always the most loathably like expensive part of any great business pursuit. And it's the same in music. Like, I feel like the R&D aspect of like getting greater at music has kind of been thrown out, because it's like, well, look, the industry has suffered so many economic setbacks that there's almost no money left in the business. There's no impetus to like go, you know what, guys, let's make something great. Like, all of a sudden, like, a money person kind of walks from the shadows and go, no, we don't do great anymore. Yeah. There's no time, no money, there's no budget for great. We need you to do this thing literally 25 times as quickly as you used to do it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We don't need you getting all lofty in your thinking about, you know, should this be better? We just need this, because somewhere along the lines with the internet, artists became content creators, which is fine. Like, I never like, I always try to remove like the large A artiste part. Like, I'm an artist, craftsperson, maker of things. And I don't sit back. I don't like to complain about stuff, you know, like, I'm like, well, you know, it's the same thing when you look at any dying industry. It's like, wouldn't it be great to keep these car plants open in Ontario? Yes, it would be, like, because the economy is like, they're a pivotal part of our economy. But the world at large is going, well, we're transitioning from, you know, combustion engine vehicles. Like, and we all know it. It's like, well, shit, like, and the world is transitioning from a place of where music used to be king of entertainment to, it has fallen so far down to the list of importance that why would I be screaming into the void that music needs to be this, and why isn't it more like it used to be, and why can't it be the thing that I thought it was going to be? And it's like, it is what it is. I'm a 45-year-old music creator with a 22-year career history in Canada at a time in the 21st century where it appears that music is of no significant interest to the world at large. Not like it was when I was a kid, obsessing over Smith's albums, you know, like it's like, so what happened? Well, I don't know. All I have to do is try to maintain my viability. But for a lot of the industry, they're going, just get that shit out there. Don't fucking worry about it. Just get that content out, get it out there, get it online, get it streaming. You know, like I look at like a lot of young artists, what they have to do for their streaming, for their Spotify. And it's like, what do they got to do? They got to do a Taylor Swift cover or something, you know, It's all a gimmick. And it's like, I don't know. Do I complain? Do I belittle the situation? It's not what I grew up with. I'm so fucking thankful that there was the shreds of the industry were still left when I started. Like, it's funny. I reached out to Universal a few months ago and I said, Lover Fighter has got to be a gold record. Like, and they went through and they like, you know, bring it up on their computer. It's like, holy shit, it's a gold record now, and an official gold record. Like it sold like 54,000 copies or something. Gold record back in the day was 50,000 copies. They moved the goalposts later to make a gold record more easy to attain with like a smaller sales count and all this stuff.
Right.
But this gold record thing really means something to me. A, because it was such a humiliation to go through that whole those years with Lover Fighter where all my thing was a disappointment to them. Even though for me, like Lover Fighter is a big part of my career, a big part of my relationship to fans, but it didn't do what the label had hoped or thought it was going to do. And I remember the first week, and your sales in your first week were always make or break back in those days, where it was like, first week set the tone for what your record sales campaign was going to look like. First week, disastrous for Lover Fighter. I went into the Universal Records offices, sat down with my A&R guy who had a long face, and he's like, Hawk, don't know what to tell you, man, but he said, your record was the most illegally downloaded record in Canada this week. And this was like brand new information to the industry. They were like, we don't know what to tell you, man. Like, fuck, we're as lost as you. We don't know what to do with this information. Because this is back when I had a real record deal with a real record budget, and they were going to put like real money behind advertising, and videos cost $80,000, and you name it. Like, this was the kind of money we were talking about back then. Right. And I was like the canary in the coal mine for the Canadian music business. Like, they were like, holy shit. Like, we were about to throw big money behind your thing. And first week is telling us this thing is going to fail, because what we are seeing is that the industry is changing fundamentally. And you're the guy, you're the guy whose thing is going to bottom out. Like, you're the guy whose career is going to like basically write the new rules going forward, because we put this music out. We put the advertising spend out. You're on Much Music. We did everything right. It's just that where the world was at, it was like, hey, I love that We Will Still Need a Song, or I love that Smoke Baby song. And all of a sudden it's like the industry changed, the public's relationship to pop music changed, the way we trade music changed. Like, it's like, it all changed. And and I think that this is why the industry why it's so hard to find things that are interesting. I think it's a financial liability to make something interesting, unless you get found in amongst the din, in amongst the noise, and are exalted and brought up and go, listen to this guy. Like, this thing is, or listen to, you know, whatever. This is something extraordinary coming out of the ether. And it happened I can't even think of, like, there has been extraordinary things happen in the digital and downloading era of pop music. Like, there has been stuff that blows my mind still. I can't think off the top of my head. I'm looking over at my vinyl collection, seeing if anything jumps out. But there's still extraordinary music being made, but I don't think it's as easy to find. I look at a guy like Daniel Romano. Do you know Daniel Romano? Canadian singer-songwriter. He made 10 records this year so far.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And they're phenomenal. Like he is a frighteningly interesting artist. I was a little bit like him in my early career, insofar as I made bizarre pop music. I seemed to make a lot of it. And the Globe and Mail would write about me, or Now Magazine, when it was still around, would write about me. Any number of Canadian print publications would write about Hawksley Workman. He's a total wild man. He's in the studio again, like, building that narrative. Well, here's a guy, Daniel Romano, who's doing that same thing times a million. And there's not a print outlet left in Canada to go, hey, folks, FYI, the big creative news in Canada is this kid called Daniel Romano from Welland, Ontario, who knows no boundaries. Like, his creative energy is absolutely extraordinary. I look at another artist, La Force out of Montreal, who made a shockingly good record 3 years ago, like bizarrely, freakishly good. And her record, if the Canadian industry looked like what it looked like when I started out, like, it would have been that 5-star record across the board. Every newspaper would have had, she would have been the front cover of any entertainment section in newspapers back when there used to be such thing as an entertainment section in newspapers. There isn't that. So how do people discover La Force? How does La Force become the new big thing? I frankly don't know. Young people are up against an almost impossible Sisyphean climb if they're going to try to get their music into the world. Like, it's bizarre what's going on.
Yeah, it is. I think in a way, this is thinking about it optimistically. Like you say, the old model is just, it's on its last legs, and it has been for a long time. But it's almost freeing in a way to know that, making the best and most interesting creative music that you can, and also expecting that to be what tops the charts and is on the radio all the time, knowing that those are two almost mutually exclusive things, or that at least shouldn't be the expectation, is really freeing in a way, because it puts all of the emphasis on just the creation of it. And that's, for us, has been a big thing in coming up in this era where it's all about streaming, it's all about social media, and it gives us a lot of creative freedom to just do what we do. And if people come to us, we know that it's because they like the music, and because God knows we don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to put behind it. Yeah,
man. I hope I haven't sounded too bleak.
No. I this is incredibly interesting to me.
Okay, good. I mean, I feel like recently, and I'm going to have to jump off in a minute here, but I feel like in much of my early career, I didn't ever want to talk about the business. Like, I was busy building the narrative around what I was doing as something that existed outside of anything unsavory that could have been considered unsavory, like the business,
Yeah.
I was back even when a time when, like, you'd get an offer to have a song in a commercial, and you'd literally have to sit down with your friends and go, am I selling out? Whereas, like, nobody talks like that anymore. Like, if somebody's going to give you $20,000 to put your song in a car commercial, you're going to do it because it's like, I need that $20,000 so bad. I'm not even sure that $20,000 for car commercials even exists, but I had a song in a car commercial, and that's, I think, what they paid. And it was like I was like, geez, really? Like, Safe and Sound was on a Volvo commercial that long ago. It was 10 years, 15, 12 years ago in the US. And that was almost at the very end of when we were, like, all asking ourselves, like, am I selling out if ... And it's like, these days, you do what you absolutely can. You do what you can.
Yeah.
It's like, am I going to begrudge an artist for trying to make $1 off what they've done when the rest of the world, like, when what they've done has been devalued to such an extraordinary level that, like if somebody's going to write them a check, shut up, like, stand down. Like, I mean, there are some businesses I wouldn't sell my songs to, like, but I do have limits, but it's not like back in the day when we all would look at Bruce Springsteen and go, can you believe Bruce Springsteen has never had a song in a commercial? It's like, well, yeah, I absolutely can. But he might as well have come from the industry's stone age. Like, it doesn't,
Yeah.
they were using flint and like wooden tools back when they were making Springsteen famous. Like, the rules are not the same. The game isn't the same,
Yeah, for sure. So I don't want to keep you too long, but I just wanted to wrap it up. It's you'd mentioned earlier about wanting to be somebody's Spooky Rubin. For what it's worth, I consider you to be my favorite artist, probably of all time. So I don't want to get super
I'm blown away by that.
But
I'm blown away by that, and I appreciate you saying it. And it's a funny feeling to hear that. I have a relationship with Bruce Coburn, who is in some ways like is even bigger than my Spooky Rubin. He's like the guy for me, and like he knows how I feel about him, and he's very awkward about it. Like, and I get it. Like, I do get it, and I appreciate what you're saying, because that somehow, like, when you're listening to records in your bedroom when you're a kid, designing the idea of your life, becoming an artist, like, one of your dreams is maybe somebody will listen to me one day and I'll be important to them. And how you saying that touches me so deeply, Sean. Honestly, I'm humbled / I'm uncomfortable about it.
Yeah, but I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
No, it's good.
I shouldn't have said it so straightforward. But it was, just the talking to you about it now and about how everything's changed. For what it's worth, again, like, especially you'd mentioned sort of how crushing in a way it was from the get-go to know that it wasn't necessarily going to go the way you'd expected, and that everything was sort of changing. In a way that, like I say, that spawned 20 years of my favorite music, and I'm sure many others. Like, everybody who I know who knows Hawksley Workman is a fan, and most of them are super fans, and that's something that money can't buy that. And that's just sort of when I think, if I could do anything even remotely like that, just to be somebody's favorite artist, that's like that is the gold standard for me.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you saying it. I really do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you have some other things you got to get to, but once again, just thank you so very much for coming on the podcast, for taking a chance on me. You're our first guest. So
good luck. I'm thinking about starting a podcast myself. So very, very, I wish you the best with it. Honestly, long form chats about music. I don't know if it's as prevalent as one might think. So I really appreciate it very much.
Oh, and we'll have to send you one of these bad boys as well in the mail. I'll email you, and maybe we can get a mailing address.
I'd love that.
A package we want to send.
I'd love it.
Wicked. Well, thank you, Hawksley, very much, and you have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on Vinyl Safari. If you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe wherever you're listening, and follow Oakridge Ave to catch the latest episodes, new music, and more. We greatly appreciate your support. You can also follow today's guest, Hawksley Workman, at hawksleyworkman.com, at Workman Hawksley on Facebook, and at Hawksley Workman on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next Vinyl Safari.